People who never struggled with depression or any mental issues don't understand. They tell us to just get over it. They think that if we try hard enough, will our minds to do so, that we'll be able to eradicate it. I honestly don't think that our mental capacities allow us to do that. We only use such a small part of our brain that it's impossible to be able to control something like a disorder, controlling somewhere in there. Neuroscientists don't even really understand the brain, and the medications and methods to treat these problems aren't necessarily solving anything. Now, those of us who deal with these things in our lives would love to just get over it, but it's sure as hell easier said than done. Before my senior year of high school, we found out that my mom had a malignant tumor in her small intestine. The tumor was removed, but there was concern that the cancerous cells could move somewhere else and develop more tumors. So my mom started chemotherapy. If you don't know what chemotherapy does to the body, I'll just tell you that it basically poisons everything inside of you in order to kill the cancerous cells. It is not specifically targeting in one area, so all of the body suffers along with the parts that the treatment is intended to destroy. Chemotherapy does not only cause a lot of suffering for the patient, it also causes a lot of stress and worry for the people who have relationships with the patient. While their bodies struggle to deal with the treatment, the people around struggle watching the pain that it causes and try to keep functioning like normal. During this time, my depression came back, and along with it came anxiety attacks, insomnia, and unremovable worry. This made it really hard for me to get by because I was so miserable. And what was even worse was that my problems incapacitated me from helping my mom. I needed to be the adult in the situation and take care of her like she had taken care of me for my whole life, and I just couldn't do it. Now I'm going to talk about how people don't understand why you're struggling and don't do much to figure out why. My last semester of high school, I took a sociology class. One day, the format of the class was for each student to be talked to by the other students in class. The students were to tell the other student in question something that they admire about them or something that they think should change. These comments were intended to help the person know what they are appreciated for in order to keep doing what they do, and also to help instruct them to become better. When it was my turn, one of the boys, who I'd known since 6th grade, said that he noticed I'd been really sad and he didn't understand why. He said that I had so much going for me and that everything was too great for me to be sad. This comment was upsetting to me because he didn't understand how I didn't have much control over what was causing me so much grief, and that I couldn't stop my brain from being filled with darkness. This comment also made me feel like he thought I was choosing to be sad, and I was not. Honestly, I didn't really have a choice in the matter. Sadness was the only way I could deal with what was going on. It was the only emotion I really had access to, beside anxiety, and in some ways it was better than anxiety. Anxiety made me worry about what was going to happen to my mother, and it made me create so many horrible scenarios. The sadness was just sadness. Even though it came from my depression, it was induced by my mom's sickness. But the sadness just made things not look good. The anxiety made things much worse. Of course, I didn't want the sadness either, but it was easier to deal with than the worry. I've struggled with depression for a decent amount of my life. Sometimes it's dormant or in remission, and I'm filled with lightness and hope. Unfortunately, giant tidal waves full of something powerful and dreadful grip my mind unexpectedly. It can either be triggered by something, like failing an exam or my mom's sickness, for example, or it can just creep up on me and catch me unprepared. When it comes, it darkens most things around me and pushes me underwater. The depths of where I go have variation. In one extreme, it seems like I'm being pushed to the bottom of the ocean. And in another, it feels as though I'm about to resurface. It's hard to get away from it because depression is not a reasonable thing. You can't just tell it to leave. It's like a negative person who hasn't got a clue you don't want to be around them, but even worse. It doesn't care if you don't want it. It doesn't care how much you try to make it go away. I never know how long it'll stay, and that's probably what scares me the most. It latches on until it feels like leaving, and this decision is never revealed to me. The times where it leaves me are the best times. Everything is re-illuminated as the light of everything good comes back. It's in these times where my creativity flows and my love for the world around me takes over. During these times, I am hopeful that my depression is receded to somewhere it cannot come back from, but I know that's not true. Perhaps it will be gone from me for a year, but it may come back in a month or a few weeks. I wish I could control it. Maybe tame the depression and turn it into something more manageable. Of course, I hope for all these things, but I have to be okay with living in the uncertainty about when it'll come back, because it always does, and it always has. I have to accept that it's part of me, and I can somewhat thank it for making the good parts of my life even better. I think the most important thing it has done for me is to be able to be compassionate and empathize with others. I can see when people are struggling, and I try to reach out if I'm able. I will stand up for things I find inappropriate, especially if they are aimed at hurting someone, and most of all, I will try to get people to understand that depression is a really difficult thing to live with, and sometimes we allow it to make the decision to take our lives. This is a response to Robin Williams' death, and the acknowledgement that I have thought about committing suicide in my past as well. Perhaps I've had more control over my depression than he did. Perhaps the thing that saved me is the fact that I know things can get better sometimes, even if they aren't all the time. Maybe his depression was constant and never waning. Whatever it was, it doesn't make the fact that he took his life any better, but it also doesn't mean that people have the right to shame his actions. If you've never lived with depression, you may not understand, but you can definitely try.